Let's talk about ADHD. Hi, my name is Joy. I'm a licensed professional counselor, mom, previous educator, and a public speaker and a lover of learning. Welcome or welcome back if you are new here. Let's get into it. So, let's talk about ADHD because everybody has an opinion about ADHD when you can just look at the research. However, there's a lot of research and it does keep evolving over time. And now we have political people talk about how vaccines and medications are impacting people's development and diagnosis and blah, blah, blah. You can be on whatever side of that you want to be. I'm not here to argue with anybody about nothing, but I'm going to tell you what I know. Okay? As someone who has worked with children with ADHD, teenagers and adolescents, young adults, and grown-ups with ADHD, all medicated versus unmedicated and sometimes medicated. I think I know a couple of things. Okay? And so I'm going to share them with you to help all of us understand a little more so we can talk about what we know instead of what we think, because that would just make the world a better place, right? So, first things first, a lot of people think that ADHD is not real. And whether you think it's real or not does not change the fact that it is. Okay? Let's just get that out of the way. You don't have to think it's real for it to be real or not. It's still going to be a thing, regardless how you feel. Do what you will with that information. So, as far as this conversation is concerned that we're having right now, it is real. And we're going to talk about it as if it's real. And if you decide at the end of this it's still not real, that's fine. That is completely fine. You're entitled to your opinion. But I'm going to give you some facts, okay? ADHD is real. ADHD is not something you just wake up and decide you have. It's not based on how you feel. It's not based on trauma. You can have ADHD symptoms that are trauma related, but ADHD as a diagnosis itself has to do with the way your brain functions or the lack thereof and the complications in which it's different from most other people. Even different from other ADHDers, right? ADHD is a form of being neurodivergent, a term that's often used, misused, and overused on the internet, but it does mean your brain works different than a neurotypical brain, which is how a typical brain, most brains, a healthy brain would work. There's some difference in the firings and the neurons and the connectivity and the communications that go on in your brain. And it can make you think different, behave different, process emotions different, and a lot of things, because our brain does a lot of things. And so you do probably a lot of things different than other people that doesn't make sense to other people, and it's fine. Once they understand that we're not all the same, it's really all just fine. I think the problem is with most things, people just expect everybody to be the same or want everybody to be like them, think like them, feel like them. And that's just not realistic, even if the person isn't ADHD. We're just all different, and we should just accept people's uniqueness. But that's a different tangent for a different day. Right now, we're talking about how real ADHD is, and it's real. So it is to do with your brain and the way your brain works without your help, which is why a lot of people on ADHD, not on ADHD, a lot of people with ADHD take medications because the medications facilitate the processes within the brain, right? So that's that. It's your brain. It's your brain. It's a brain thing. It's a brain, not condition, but it's a matter of the brain and the way the brain works differently or lack thereof, because everybody with ADHD is different. Now, one thing we need to address is there's no longer an ADD versus ADHD. There once upon a time, a long time ago, I can't talk, there was a difference. ADD was just attention deficit disorder, and ADHD is attention deficit hyperactive disorder. Now, as of the DSM-5, which is a diagnostic manual that we use as professionals, it's only ADHD, but you can have an inattentive type and a hyperactive type. What is that? Attention deficit hyperactive disorder, however, you can have an inattentive type, which you probably don't be paying attention, easily distracted, squirrel. Sound familiar? Or You can't sit down, you can't be still, you fidgeting, gotta be doing something all the time. You bouncing off the wall, jumping off the sofa, those type of things. And you can have a little bit of both. So those are the types that are currently in the DSM that we go by now. We no longer use the term ADD. Depending on how old you are, you may have been diagnosed with ADD, and it's fine. It'll be recognized by a professional. We know what it means. However, current day, modern times, it's only ADHD, and it manifests differently. Usually, it's better caught earlier. The sooner you catch it, the easier it is to put in safeguards and other things to help manage it, control the behaviors. Because the other thing about it is when you're very young, some of it is a maturity thing. And that goes into the part of this conversation about misdiagnosis. A lot of people are diagnosed very young. You may be one of these people that are diagnosed around the age of 5. They allow diagnoses that early. But however, this is more my personal opinion and professional opinion, but not research necessarily, is that there's so many nuances in small children that can impact their diagnoses. One being maturity level. Everybody matures at different stages and ages, as well as stages of development. Everybody doesn't learn how to walk at the same time. Everybody doesn't learn how to crawl at the same time. Everyone doesn't go to the bath, be potty trained at the same time. And so some of these milestones, so to speak, just vary from person to person. Again, because we're just all different. The other thing is about small children is their diet. Contrary to popular belief, a lot of things we feed our kids that they enjoy has a lot of sugar in it. A lot of kids do not have bedtimes and they're sleep deprived. And everybody is a little annoying when they're sleep deprived, including you. I definitely am. I'm more agitated, irritated, all these things. And so lifestyle can also impact certain symptoms someone may display. Now, again, as a professional, they are supposed to rule these things out and evaluate these things, unlike you as a parent or family member or friend. But I'm just letting you know, because I want you to consider, if you are a parent and you are a loved one of someone with a young child, that there's concerns of ADHD. While they may fit the diagnosis, just consider some other things. I always recommend getting a second diagnosis the younger the child is. Okay, not to say the first person doesn't know what they're doing, but a different approach may cause for a different outcome. You may find someone who is quick to diagnose, and you may find someone who is slow to diagnose, and both of their opinions are valid based on what are they using to make their decisions, their professional decisions, right? Someone with a holistic point of view may come at it differently than someone who is just all for medications and may prescribe sooner. I am not a psychiatrist. I'm not here to talk to you about medications for ADHD or for anything for that matter. I'm not a doctor. However, I will say take any medications as prescribed. If you have problems with your medications, take it up with your psychiatrist. And if you were prescribed medication by your PCP and not a psychiatrist, I would strongly recommend you to follow up with the psychiatrist to evaluate that you're on the right medications and the right dosage, because ADHD medications specifically for this conversation can have really significant side effects, and being on the wrong medications can seem to exacerbate certain symptoms and or create newer ones. At least it will feel that way because you're not functioning optimally because you're not on the right medication. That's the extent into which I can talk about medication, is that if you have a problem with it, you don't feel right, do not abruptly stop it. Always take it as prescribed. Speak to your doctor about your questions and concerns. If you do not feel heard, find another doctor. Always. And that goes for therapists. Find a therapist if you do not feel heard. Okay, so going back to misdiagnoses, if your kid is eating donuts and cereal for breakfast, they're probably hyper because they're having too much sugar. Or because they got up and made their bed and didn't give you problems this morning, you gave them a piece of candy on the way to school, they're probably gonna be hyperactive. If they don't have a bedtime, or you put them in their room and you don't know if they're going to sleep, and they're probably laying there till 2 a.m, counting something on the wall or the ceiling, or playing with their toes, whatever they're doing, counting the crumbs in their bed, sleep deprivation is not good for anybody. They are probably going to be a little wild and a little wacky and a little silly because they are burned out, right? And then again, maturity varies age by age. Now, something that isn't talked about that you can do more research on, this is research, is that there is a correlation between grief and ADHD diagnosis. What I mean by that is it has been found that if a child experiences grief recent being within 2 years, that they are more likely to have signs of ADHD. One, because of their age. Again, talking about 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds. Brain's not developed. They don't have much understanding. Their grief tends to be a little more complicated, hard to understand. It may not look like grief for an adult because they struggle to process grief because they do not understand the life cycle, particularly at this point. However, they may miss this person. Younger ages struggle with object permanence of someone being dead. What does that mean? Are they here or not? Where did they go? Are they on vacation? If they will actually see them again or not? Those types of things don't really make sense to them. And so even though you've told them someone passed away, they don't get what that means. And so they may act out because they want to see this person, they miss this person, where is this person? All these things that are confusing for someone who doesn't understand can contribute to behaviors or actions that manifest that look like ADHD. Do your research. So all things considered, again, this is why professionals are important. Again, at the same time, not all professionals are created equally and may come to different conclusions. Depending on the standards or criteria in which they use to make the diagnosis and how thorough they are to make the diagnosis. You can get your child tested in the schools for ADHD, typically for free. Just request testing. Don't let nobody push back on that. If you want testing, request it. They have to do it. But however, always get a second opinion before you take it and run with it. They can be assessed through their PCP, a psychiatrist, as well as evaluated with therapists as well. You can put them in play therapy if they're significantly younger and have the therapist evaluate and express their concerns if they have any concerns for ADHD or other things, or if it's a kid being a kid. I think we always need to give room for a kid being a kid, because once you put them on the medication, they are more likely to continue needing it. And so if they were to grow out of some of these behaviors, depending on the medications, depending on the child, they may now be medication dependent. So speaking of medication dependent, if you are on medication for ADHD, you should take it as prescribed. As I previously mentioned, I'm not a doctor. I just am a professional. You should take it as prescribed, because I have seen this firsthand when I worked at elementary school. When you take the medication and stop taking the medication and take the medication, it's a whirlwind of things you want to avoid, right? And what I noticed for some of the kids who have more severe symptoms of ADHD is that it kind of made their symptoms escalate. It made it more severe. Every time they would go up and down, the parents would have legitimate concerns. I don't like the way my child's personality is. They seem like a zombie. They lost their personality. Those are things you should talk to the doctor. I know those are reasons you don't want to take the medication, but you should talk to the doctor about that, because those are legitimate concerns. The medication may be too strong or the wrong one. Again, go see a different doctor if your doctor is not listening to you. I think those are legitimate. I'm not mad at parents who are concerned that their baby, who is a bubbly, happy-go-lucky person, is sitting in the corner not talking. You should be concerned. You should be. However, abruptly stopping the medication, again, remember ADHD is in the brain, you're altering brain chemicals and whatever else is going on up there, because remember, I'm not a doctor. So whatever all is happening up there, you're playing with it by playing with the medication. And it was already not where it needed to be before the medication, which is why you're on the medication. You get where I'm going with this? And so now we're creating new problems or worsening problems that already existed. And so again, what I would see when I worked in elementary school is kids would have some level of ADHD. They take the medicine, they would settle down, they would perform better. Their personality was a little turned off, I'll be honest. They were more functioning though. They were more productive. And then the parents would be like, I just don't like it. I want my baby to be laughing. My baby's really silly. Legitimate concern. You can always say that. So they stop giving them medicine because it breaks their heart to see their kid like that. Okay? And then the kid come back doing stuff they've never done before. Why are you in my closet? Why are you in the backpack closet? Come out of there. Based on a true story. They're crawling on the floor under the desk. These are fourth graders. Can you please get up and get in your seat? The behavior would seemingly worsen every time we would get on and off this cycle. And it's like, where did this come from? You didn't used to do this. Almost as if it was age regression. Because their behavior would decline so much. It was so odd and obvious when they were on and off the medications. And of course, we'd have to talk to the parents like, hey, we noticed that they're now doing these things that they weren't doing before. Or they're doing these things way more than they ever used to. What's going on? How are things going? When's your last doctor's appointment? If you're a teacher, side note, you should not be talking about medication with anybody. That should have been in your training, but you were not supposed to ask parents about medication. Now, I was already a licensed professional when I was a teacher. But even then, I didn't bring it up. I let parents bring it up, and then I just would ask more questions because I knew what questions to ask. But you're not supposed to be, when the kids get to school, you're not supposed to be like, did you take your medicine today? You can't do that. I think that's illegal, actually. You're not allowed to do that. Who are you? But however, I do know teachers can tell. Because I can tell. We can all tell. The kids can tell. Miss, I'm not on my medicine today. We know, baby. We know. Okay? So, another thing we need to talk about when it comes to ADHD is punishment and misbehavior. You cannot discipline ADHD out of your child, out of anybody. No amount of grounding will work because they are not doing these things intentionally. They're not behaving these. They are not jumping on the couch and bouncing off the walls because they want to. It's almost like they can't help themselves. They have to. They have to get that energy out, the nerves out, whatever it is. This is just who they are and how they are for the most part. Now, again, you can teach them self-control over time as they mature, but you cannot beat the hell out of them. You cannot beat the ADHD out of them. You cannot pray the ADHD out of them. You can do other things with some of those methods, but let's not waste any time here. There could be time better spent doing other things than trying to punish them for something that is mostly out of their control. Now, I think as they mature, there are certain things you can put in place. The people with ADHD need structure and routines. And so if you're all over the place, your kid is 9 times out of 10 going to be even more so all over the place. Something to consider. Everybody needs to be on a routine, on a schedule that you stick to as closely as possible, as much as possible. And if things are going to be different, you need to express that to the person with ADHD so they can mentally prepare. Hey, next week, we're going to get up at 7 instead of 7:30. And say that every day, multiple times a day, like, don't forget next week, we're going to start waking up early. I know you're used to waking up. Whatever it is, you introduce to them early and let them, I can give you a whole seminar on work with kids with ADHD. But one of the story is, they're not usually being defiant on purpose. Sometimes they're actually trying their hardest, and them restraining themselves is making them act out in other ways because they're burned out from trying so hard to function and be compliant on their own will, especially if they're unmedicated. It's exhausting for them because they are having these urges to jump up and down, and you keep telling them to sit down. They cannot sit down. Like, they can, but it's not a realistic expectation. And you grounding them, taking their iPad or whatever, they know they do miss the iPad because I hear clients say, They want the iPad. They look forward to iPad time. They know iPad time. They know they want the iPad. They like the iPad, but it's not connected to their behavior. They're just like, oh, I must have did something. Now I don't have my iPad. But things that they don't have control over are not being connected to as like, oh, if I don't sit down for 12 hours a day, I won't get my iPad. It's just like, oh, my mom was mad at me. I can't use my iPad. You get what I'm saying? So it's just not effective. And if you're going to say you did this, and it worked for you, great. There's always an exception to the rule. But I'm just telling you, as a rule of thumb, you cannot discipline ADHD out of anybody. I'm not going to argue about it. So that's all I'm going to say here. I'm going to leave it here because I've already chewed your head off. I hope this gave you some clarity, some insight. If you have more questions about this and need a more informational style video, leave a comment, let me know, and I will try to make a follow-up video to explain more. I just wanted to make this video to address, I know people say people are being overdiagnosed with ADHD, and there is some truth to that. Some people say people are misdiagnosed. There is some truth to that. But there's also a lot of nuances that contribute to this conversation of understanding ADHD and its diagnosis, and I just wanted to address that. Okay? So see you on the next one.